Pacing isn't about explosions. It's not about action scenes or how fast the plot moves. I used to think that slow pacing meant I needed more things to happen, more conflict, more drama, more stuff. So I'd add things, and the draft would get busier, but it wouldn't get better. It just felt crowded and slow at the same time, which is just one of the worst combinations a story can have. What I finally figured out is that pacing has almost nothing to do with what happens in a scene. It has everything to do with what one scene gives to the next. Once I got that, I found a way to check my scenes that takes about 15 minutes, and it almost always shows me exactly where the mud is. This video is about scene structure, not as a set of rules, but as a way to see the energy moving through your draft, and why it sometimes stops. By the end of this video, you'll have a scene check you can use on any draft that's lost its momentum. It will show you not just where the pacing went wrong, but why, and what to do about it. Welcome everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Daniel, and this is The Story Renaissance. A scene isn't just a piece of the plot. It's not just the thing that happens next. It's a unit of energy. Every scene has a job to do. It carries a charge into the story, and it leaves something behind when it's done. Here's how I think about it. Every scene has an entry charge and an exit charge. The entry charge is what the reader brings in. What are they feeling? What are they worried about? What question is still open from the last scene? Exit charge is what the scene sends them into the next one with. Not just new facts, a new feeling, a new worry, a new question that needs an answer. No Country for Old Men does this so well, both the book and the film. Every scene ends on a charge that the next scene has to deal with. Think about that coin toss scene at the gas station. Shigur has been talking to the old owner for a few minutes now about nothing much. The weather, where he's from. But under every line of that small talk is this awful pressure. The feeling that the old man has no idea how close he is to dying. Then Shigur flips a coin and tells him to call it. The old man calls it right. And Shigur tells him to put the coin in his pocket and don't mix it with the others, because it's the best thing that ever happened to him, even if he doesn't know it yet. Then he leaves. The scene ends, not with relief, but with a cold, creeping wrongness. The old man lived, and you still feel like something awful just happened. That feeling, unresolved, unexplained, is what the next scene picks up. McCarthy and the Coen brothers both understood that the energy doesn't reset between scenes. It builds. Every scene picks up what the last one left behind and adds to it. That buildup is what creates the heavy, pressing momentum the story is known for. Not the violence, the charge that comes before it, scene after scene. That's what a scene is really doing under the plot. It's charging the reader for what comes next. When scenes stop doing that, when they end too cleanly, when the exit charge is flat, the draft loses its pull. But knowing scenes should pass energy forward is one thing. Knowing how to track whether that's happening is something else. Here's a pattern I see most in my own drafts when the pacing goes soft. The scenes are complete. Each one has a start, a middle, and an end. Conflict in the scene shows up and gets resolved. The characters say what needs to be said, then the scene closes, and the next one opens fresh. It feels like good writing. It's actually what's killing the momentum of your story. A scene that fully resolves itself lets all of its tension out before it ends. And tension that's gone has to be built again from scratch in the next scene, which means every scene starts from zero, which means the reader starts from zero. The draft where the reader has to rebuild that interest every few pages doesn't just have a pacing problem, it has a structural problem that prevents momentum from being able to exist at all. Gillian Flynn gets this. Gone Girl's momentum is almost all about structure, not plot. Plot isn't that complex. What makes it so hard to put down is that Flynn almost never lets a scene end cleanly. Look at Amy's early diary entries. Each one ends with something that doesn't quite add up. Detail that's a little too tidy. A line that sounds like someone putting on a show of being happy rather than actually being happy. Flynn never points at it. He just leaves it there at the end of the scene, unresolved. The reader carries it forward. Or look at Nick's scenes in the present. He keeps almost saying something and then stopping. He keeps noticing things and then brushing them off in a way that feels like he's trying too hard. Every scene exit has a small splinter in it. Nothing ends cleanly. That pile up of small, unresolved things is what makes the novel feel like it's speeding up, even in the quiet parts. The tension doesn't go away at the end of a scene, it moves to the next one, and the reader carries it forward. That's why the book is so hard to put down. The question isn't whether your scenes are well written, the question is whether they're letting their tension go too soon. And I have a simple way to check for that. Quick aside, if you're in a draft that's lost its momentum and you don't know where it went, that's exactly the kind of thing that we worked through inside Story Renaissance. It's my school community for writers where we dig into this kind of stuff every week. The link's in the description below. Okay, back to it. The trick I use is so simple, it almost feels too simple, but it works every time, and that's what matters. For each scene, I ask two questions. First, what is the reader carrying with them when they arrive at this scene? Not just what happened before, what feeling, what open question, what tension are they holding when the first line of this scene hits them? If I can't answer that, it usually means the last scene ended too cleanly and didn't pass anything forward. Second, what is the reader carrying when they leave this scene? What's changed? Not just in terms of plot facts, but in how they feel. What are they now worried about, or hoping for, or dreading? If their answer is about the same as when they came in, the scene may have happened without actually moving the plot forward. The Wire is a good example here because it's a show that keeps its momentum across 5 seasons of very dense, sometimes very slow storytelling. Season 3 has entire episodes that are essentially just people talking in rooms, strategy sessions, political maneuvering, Bunny Colvin trying to figure out what to do with Amsterdam. None of it is action in the normal sense, but it never feels slow. What David Simon's writers understood is that you can move slowly if you're always passing something forward. Take any scene between McNulty and Freeman in the later seasons. 2 detectives sitting in a car or standing over a board covered in photos. The scene might just be sharing information, but it almost never ends the same way it started. By the exit, one of them knows something they wish they didn't, or the thing they've been chasing has gotten a little more dangerous. Or the bureaucratic wall they're pushing against has shown them a new enemy that they have to face. The transfer is sometimes small, but it's never nothing. And that steady, small transfer, scene after scene, is what keeps 5 seasons of a show about bureaucracy and systemic failure feeling urgent all the way through. That's what I'm looking for when I run the check. Not big dramatic exits, just did something move? Is the reader carrying anything forward that they weren't carrying before? And if not, what would need to change for that to happen? Most of the time, the answer isn't a full rewrite. It's smaller than that. And that leads me to the part that surprised me most when I started doing this. When I started running this check on drafts that felt soggy, I expected to find problems in the scenes that felt slow. That's not what I found. Almost every time, the problem was one scene earlier than I expected. The slow scene wasn't slow because of anything wrong with it on its own. It was slow because the scene before it had let out all of its tension and sent the reader in with nothing. No questions, no open feeling, no charge that needed somewhere to go. So the slow scene had to start from zero and build all the way back up. And by the time it got there, the damage was done. This is why fixing pacing by fixing the slow scenes almost never works. You're fixing the wrong thing. The real problem is almost always in the handoff that came before it. The Remains of the Day shows this well because it's a book famous for its restraint. Stevens is a butler telling the story of a road trip, and not much happens on the surface for long stretches, and yet the pacing never feels slow. What Ishiguro does is make sure Stevens is always carrying something unresolved into the next section, something he thinks he's dealt with but hasn't. He reflects on his feelings for Miss Kenton and tells himself he has no feelings about how things turned out. But the way he explains it, how hard he works to explain why he doesn't feel anything, tells you everything. He remembers late night talk with her and stays on it longer than a man with no feelings would, then quickly moves on. He tells himself his father was a great man and that he made all the right choices, but the certainty is a little too strong. Each of these moments ends with an unresolved weight that moves into the next section. Not as big dramatic tension, but as a quiet pressure the reader feels. Even when Stevens is just talking about silverware, the slowness on the surface never feels dull, because underneath it, something is always alive and unfinished. That's what the check is really looking for. Not action, not drama, just, is there something alive under the scene that's moving forward? Is the reader carrying a live wire into the next page? If yes, the pacing will take care of itself, even when the surface is quiet. If no, you know exactly where to look. Here's what I've come to understand about pacing that changed how I see drafts. Pacing isn't about any one scene, it's about how scenes connect with each other. You can have 10 well written scenes that each work on their own and still have a draft that goes nowhere because the scenes aren't talking to each other. They're just happening in order. What creates momentum is charge moving forward, tension that doesn't let go too soon, questions that open in one scene and stay open in the next. A reader who is always carrying something live, something that needs an answer, into the next page. That's what makes a draft feel like it's pulling you forward instead of pushing you through it. 15-minute check is just a way of asking, is the charge moving? Is anything being passed forward? And when I find the place where that broke down, where a scene ended too cleanly and sent the reader in with nothing, fixing it is almost always simpler than I thought. Most of the time, it's just one beat at the end of a scene, one question left slightly open, one detail that doesn't quite land, one feeling that moves forward instead of going away. That's often the whole difference between a story the reader gets bored of and one that they can't put down. If you're working on a draft right now that feels like you're wading through it, where the scenes are fine, but the whole thing has lost its pull, I built a space for exactly that. It's called the Story Renaissance, a group of writers working through the hard parts of their projects. Drafts that stall, the middles that go slack, the moments where you know something is wrong, but can't find where. We do a weekly Write Together live stream where you can just show up and work, and we talk through this stuff. What's actually going wrong, what to try, how to find the problem when it's hiding one scene earlier than you think. No courses, no gurus, just writers who get it. The link is in the description and the pinned comment below. I'd love to have you there. Here's what I want you to try after this video. Pick any scene in your draft that feels slow. Don't touch it yet. Go to the scene right before it and ask, what did that scene pass forward? What is the reader carrying when they arrive at the slow scene? What open question or unresolved feeling is still alive? If the answer is nothing, if the last scene resolved everything cleanly, that's your problem. And the fix is usually just one beat, one thing left unresolved at the end of the scene. Try it. It takes 15 minutes, and it almost always shows you exactly where the problem started. Now that you understand this, the next video you need to watch is this one I made about your character's wants versus their need. Because once your scenes are passing energy forward, the thing that decides whether that energy means anything is whether your character has somewhere real to go underneath the surface of the story. The two videos go hand in hand. I'll see you there.